This is Back Roads of Illinois, server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Is edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We're bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We're glad you're here on today for our program. I'm joining with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. We were talking about the commodities markets with these grains markets, especially with this corn markets. We were talking about that with Tyler. Otherwise, this is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold in central Illinois. The state fair for Illinois is going to be on Thursday, August 20th in Springfield. The fair has passed time for the family and kids are with for. Otherwise, we're joining us for the state fair for this week in Springfield. The corn is looking good for this season in central Illinois. However, there are some concerns about the tar spot and southern rust. You have to ask questions about it with your agronomist. The farm progress shows indicator for August 26th or Thursday, August 28th, right after the state fair. You've been listening to Back Roads of Illinois. I'm joining with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. Hey, Tyler, how are you today?
Doing good, Cesar. Doing good. Always good to visit with you.
Let's discuss about the world supply and demand report from USDA. What is your position on this report?
Well, so the thing to remember the items that are likely to get changed on this report. Number one, that's probably going to be the headline number most people are going to be looking for is the new crop corn yield. That's probably the highlight that everyone's going to be watching out for. The USDA has been at about a 181.1 yield, which is a shorter term trend line average. There's been a lot of chatter out there in the market that it's probably likely higher. How high is anyone's guess at this moment. Just a reminder, 181.1 would be a record yield by a few bushel an acre, beating our yield from last year. So there's still a lot of growing season left. The only input that the USDA will utilize in determining yield on this report in August is going to be farmer surveys that they've collected. That's going to happen end of July. So we'll have to see what farmers come and tell them. And an interesting point of information that listeners may want to be aware of is you recall last year, we kind of came in the same scenario. USDA went with their shorter term trend line yield around that 181 mark, and we got into August and they raised it. They bumped it up, and I believe by late fall they were like a 183 yield estimate. And then when they come in January, when you get that final yield number, they actually lowered it down to around 179. And we talked to Lance Honig out at Commodity Classic this year, and we discussed it. And he said, the reason they were so high and they were at that 183 number was largely due to farmer surveys. That's what farmers were telling them. So it'll be interesting to see how farmers rate this crop. I mean, there's a lot of farmers that they don't want to come out publicly and tell you that their crop is good. They kind of want to point to all the issues they're having. But at the end of the day, it seems to be a pretty good crop sitting out there. So that's the first thing I'd be looking at. The second thing is how the USDA looks at exports, their old crop export number. We've already eclipsed that with 4 weeks left, so that'll have to come up a little bit. And then it'll be more of about what do they do with feed and residual? Do they lower feed usage to offset any export demand? And then after that, I think the next big thing that everyone's going to be paying attention to is world numbers. You know, what do they do with the Brazilian soybean crop and Brazilian corn crop? There's a lot of private analysts pushing those numbers higher and higher, and the USDA really hasn't done much to those numbers in the last few reports. So, be interesting to see how they handle those different areas on the balance sheet.
What is your thoughts on the corn yield from the harvest season without the report because the crop are looking good with pollination early and the weather?
You know, I'm gonna kind of I'm stick with what Mike Toohill said on our one of our meetings here a few weeks ago. Kind of put him on the spot, told him, you know, give us your national yield estimate. He came in with a 182. He gets to walk a lot of those fields in your high yielding areas of Iowa and Illinois, and has been very pleasantly surprised. You know, the thing to remember, you're going to run into some disease pressures. You're going to run into some fungus issues. I wouldn't say this crop's, you hear some private analysts in the 190 range, pushing the upper 180s. I don't think I'm in that camp yet. Maybe we do, but before I get on that train, I think I got to see a final number in January at, above the current, trend line of 181 before I get too excited about being whole hog, 10, 15% above the trend line yield. The other thing I'll say is I get why we do this in this industry, but we spend a lot of time trying to figure this out. Let's be honest. I talk to a lot of farmers and they can't even tell me within 20, 30 bushel right now what their end yield is going to be in a lot of cases. So, there's, this is a art. It's not a science. We'll never know exactly what it is. We try to boil it down to the simplest ways that we can talk about it. But boy, we come over 182 yield on the number of acres we planted. That's a lot of corn's got to get moved. And so right now, if I'm a producer, I'm looking at it as there's a lot of crop that's going to be coming to town, and I need to be thinking about all the bushels that I can't store that've got to move. I got to be looking at what I can do. And to be right honest with you, you're probably not going to love your options right now or the different things you can do with it because basis is starting to crack and weaken, and the futures just aren't giving us any type of a selling rally.
Of course, topical stuff in farming, Tyler, with the weeds and diseases such as well.
Yeah, those are difficult to pinpoint, how much of an effect it will have and where and what the result will be. So, I think it's one of those we have to expect a big crop coming. That doesn't seem to be changing no matter what. It's just a matter of is it slightly smaller or a little bit above where we think it might be.
The cattle markets is up for this week. The job markets is up at 4% from July report. So what is your thoughts on the economy in general for the future?
I would, the economy has been a very tricky one to try to estimate how it's going to react. There's a lot of balls up in the air at any one moment. Markets like certainty. They don't like uncertainty. So we're in an area where there's a lot of uncertainty. The stock market has been on fire. It's seen some of the biggest daily moves you've ever seen in the calendar of 2025. But for the most part, the economy has held in there. So I think, my perspective is you have to assume it continues to just kind of hang in there as it has. So when we relate that back to the cattle market, I feel like demand is still strong. We know that supply of cattle is relatively tight, and cash prices continue to tell that story that it's really hard to find cattle. So I'm not, I mean, it's something that I'm paying attention to. If I own cattle, I am dang sure going to have them hedged in some way, shape, or form or protected because there's just too much risk out there not to. But as far as what do I see happening in the future, I'm still I think cattle remain supported for the short term, but I'll say what I've been saying for almost 3 years now. What wrecks the cattle market will probably not be supply and demand in the cattle market. It will be some outside factor that's really difficult to predict. And so that's why I continue to say if you got cattle, they need to be hedged. They should be protected. But in the same token, until we get that external force, I think the market stays fairly supported in here.
How is the stock markets for today with the cattle markets?
Stock market was pretty strong. It rebounded. We had a pretty big sell off on Friday, and that was a result of some of the trade deals that occurred. But we've basically gained all of those losses back. So on Friday, August 1st, when we got a bunch of the, updated tariff information, and we're basically right back to where we started prior to Friday. So that's where this struggle has been. It's been really tough to try to estimate or predict what the effect of all that tariff news is going to be because it changes almost daily.
October feeder took a huge swing today.
Yeah, the feeder calf market's been a really tough one to try to trade on an intraday basis. You had a $7 range, high to low. So it's bouncing all over the place. Really not a lot of rhyme or reason as to why it's doing what it's doing. And again, I think it just goes back to, the cash market doesn't want to tip over. Cash prices continue to get really high cash prices continue to get paid for these calves. And until we see it back off in the cash, it's going to be really tough to pull the futures lower.
Do you have any final thoughts about the world supply and demand report?
No, final thought, I guess, is just it'll be another one. The market will trade it, and as soon as about 15 minutes later, we'll be on to the next shiny thing to talk about.
How is the reflection on the technical side?
The technicals, in my opinion, and I'm not the greatest technician. I don't spend a lot of time looking
Uh,
at technical charts. I try to focus on fundamentals and make hedging decisions based on them. But the technicals have been difficult to trade in a lot of markets this year. Corn should be looking to bottom based on a very long-term downward trending channel. And if it can, I don't like when I say bottom, I don't think that means we're going to 460 anytime soon. It just means feels like we're going to put in a little bit of a floor here in the short term. Might have a little bit of upward movement over the next few days, but soybeans also really difficult market to be trading technically. Been kind of chopping all over the place.
Thanks, Tyler. You have a good day.
You too. Take care, Caesar.
This is Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net on back roads of Illinois.